Okay, hello everyone. I am Rachel with the Progressive Change Campaign Committee. Folks, it's been a while, but we are back. So we are so excited to be back here with you all tonight, this afternoon, wherever you're joining us from. Thank you so much for taking the time. We know there is a lot going on. So you taking the time to be here with us tonight is special. So thank you. So we are thrilled to have Jamie Mcleod-Skinner running in Oregon's 5th Congressional District here with us tonight. Folks, please go ahead and turn on your cameras if you feel comfortable with it. We want to feel a greater sense of community and like we're together now. So go ahead and flip those cameras on. We really have built the most time for people to engage Jamie with questions. So when you have a question, please just go ahead and drop it into the chat box. My colleague Manju will come to you when we're coming to you with your question. So feel free to drop it in at any point, and Jamie's eager to get to them. Bear with me. We want to be respectful of your time and Jamie's time, so we will do our very best to get to as many as we can. And one final note: while we've designed these events, these get-togethers, to not charge a fee on the front end. We think that's really important because we want you to hear directly from the candidate. We want you to be able to ask the candidate your questions. And then if you like what you're hearing, if you agree, if you feel inspired, then we hope that you'll consider chipping in. And we'll make that very easy. We'll drop that donate link into the Dropbox a few times throughout this chat. And if that's something you can consider doing, Jamie and all of us at the PTRIP would be grateful for that. So one thing we've been doing that's become kind of tradition now is that we kind of all unmute and we all say hi to Jamie and each other and have a little bit of fun to get things going. So after you unmute, please mute yourself back. But for a minute now, for a second or two, please go ahead and mute yourself now. Let's say hello to Jamie and let's say hello to each other.
Hi.
Hello, Jamie.
Hello, Jamie.
Hi. Hey, Jamie, you're wonderful.
Jamie.
Thank you, folks.
Hi, Jamie.
Hello. Perfect.
Hi.
Thank you, folks. Okay, great. So let me go ahead and turn it over to our co-founder, Dr. Stephanie Taylor. She's the one that has conceived of our Meet the Candidate event. So without her, we would not be here. So cheers to Stephanie, and let me turn it over to our co-founder, Dr. Stephanie Taylor.
Thank you, Rachel. Hello, everybody. It's so good to see you all again. Thank you for joining our call tonight. I am so excited to introduce Jamie Mcleod-Skinner, who is running in Oregon's 5th Congressional District against a current Democratic representative, Kurt Schrader. And I will get to Kurt Schrader in just a minute, but first, let me talk a little bit about Jamie. She is an engineer, she's an attorney, she's a former union member. When we talked, she told me about how her mom drove a school bus and taught special ed and picked fruit in the summers. And I can tell she hasn't forgotten her roots. She hasn't forgotten where she comes from. I love the straightforward, no nonsense way she talks about the issues. And I also think it's incredibly important that she's drawing contrast with her opponent, Kurt Schrader. Because so often Democrats are afraid to name their opponents or to be clear about what their opponents stand for, and she isn't. And she even has a contrast section on her website. So I wanted to take a minute and I wanted to talk about some of those contrasts. Jamie supports Medicare drug price negotiation. Kurt Schrader does not. Jamie supports Build Back Better and its climate provisions. Kurt Schrader does not. Jamie supports holding corporations accountable for their roles in the climate crisis. Kurt Schrader does not. Jamie supports banning congressional stock trading. Kurt Schrader does not. Jamie supports raising the federal minimum wage. Kurt Schrader does not. Jamie supports passing the PRO Act to rebuild America's labor movement, and Kurt Schrader does not. And there's one more shocking fact you should know about Kurt Schrader, which is that Kurt Schrader didn't support impeaching Trump for January 6th, and he called the impeachment a, quote, lynching. The primary is very soon. It's May 17th, and Jamie needs help now. So I'm so excited for you to hear from her, and I hope you'll be excited to support her. We don't need Democrats in Congress like Kurt Schrader. We need Democrats in Congress like Jamie Mcleod-Skinner. So let me now warmly welcome Jamie for remarks before we open things up for question and answers.
Well, thank you so much, Stephanie. And thanks to all of you for being here. Thanks for being champions for the core values that we need to move forward, that our families need to get our economy going again, and to protect our environment, and really to protect our democracy. Stephanie, I really appreciate you mentioning the story about my mom, because that's really important to me. I mean, we stand on the shoulders of those who came before us, and my mom is my greatest hero. I'm a product of public schools, paid my way through college and law school. I'm a small business owner and now work also in emergency preparedness, and also working on affordable housing. You know, I've led teams and $1 million projects to really get communities back on their feet in wildfire recovery. During COVID, I was working as an interim city manager, helping a city that a third of it had burned down due to wildfires, and also helping small businesses stay open by distributing some of those COVID checks that Kurt Schrader thought were too high for folks. That was the difference between small businesses keeping their doors open. One of the things that has really informed and shaped this race is the new configuration. So last year, Oregon got a new congressional district. The lines were all redrawn. But back in 2018, I ran in the old 2nd congressional district, which was the most conservative part of Oregon, 2/3 of the state. It was everything east of the Cascades in Southern Oregon, for those of you who know. And we actually had, it was the reddest, most conservative part of Oregon. And we had the largest voter swing of any congressional race in the entire country here in Oregon, by just reaching out and connecting with folks. I drove the equivalent of 15 times across the country just to show up and listen to people and connect with voters. I'm actually the only Democrat in 50 years to win Deschutes County, which is in Central Oregon, is now part of the newly drawn 5th, to win that in a congressional House race. And, you know, even won precincts that Trump won. And the thing that I found, and this is really where we win on the issues, we win on progressive issues. And the bottom line is, all of us, this is regardless of party affiliation, regardless of how people identify themselves, we all want to be able to put a roof over our head and food on our tables. We want opportunities for our kids. We want healthcare for our families when they're sick. We want childcare. We want, you know, we want to have a living wage. We want to be able to retire with dignity. We don't want our homes to burn down. Those are the issues that progressives are talking about and trying to move forward. And the thing I found, you know, meeting with some of the most conservative folks in our state, is it was often about the language. So, for example, back then, sometimes people would be against Obamacare, but supportive of the ACA. So this sense of realizing that sometimes it's about how we present our ideas, because the ideas that we have are what people need to get back on their feet. You know, I'm running because we're in a time of crisis. Coming out of COVID, our economy is struggling. Working families are struggling so hard. Our homes are literally burning down here in Oregon and other parts of the country as well. Drought is destroying our farms, and our democracy is truly in crisis. So we're in this time of crisis, but we are also very much in a time of hope, because if we work together and we lean into this challenge, the challenges of now, we can move through this and we can be successful. You know, I'm running against someone who is a millionaire hero. 4 houses across the country. He actually lives most of his time in his house in Maryland. He's taken, in his 25-year career in politics, he's taken about $8 million in corporate PAC money, and he's been he's voted for his donors on, there was a mention before of lowering prescription drug prices. Kurt Schrader has taken over $700,000 in corporate PAC money from Big Pharma, and he's voted in their favor. He was the deciding vote against Medicare negotiating prescription drug prices. He's taken $300,000 from big oil and big gas, and stripped out protections for our climate and for sustainable energy that we desperately need to protect our homes here in Oregon. And that's not just progressives talking, that's conservatives talking as well. He voted against the American Rescue Plan and stimulus checks and increasing the minimum wage, and the PRO Act twice before he finally was picketed and voted for it. So he separated out Build Back Better. We had a great solution in the full Build Back Better package that had both the social and physical infrastructure. And he was one of the handful of Democrats, and I almost want to use air quotes on that, to pull that apart. So, back when the lines were redrawn, I had folks from all over the district reach out. We've got great support in this race. Four of the county Democratic parties in this race have actually taken the unprecedented step of endorsing me in the primary, including Kurt's home county. We've got newspapers, local and regional newspapers who have endorsed, got over 70 state elected officials, even folks who've endorsed Kurt in the past say he's lost touch. He does not understand the urgency of now, and are publicly endorsing me in this race. So we've got just a great, we've got great momentum going, but we're up against someone who takes a ton of corporate PAC money. And so the polling we did, it's a little bit dated now, but we did earlier on, showed us pretty much neck and neck with about a third of the voters to convince. And so we've been really doing our work to reach out to those voters. He's got very high unfavorables, which creates essentially a vulnerability for the seat in the general. We've got really high positives because of all the work we've done in all these key areas. And so, and we've seen even folks at the national level step in. And so Oregonians are seeing this as Oregonians versus, those who are part of the political machinery and the corporate PAC machinery, trying to tell Oregonians who we want to represent us, and Oregonians are pushing back. One other just a funny story that came up is, we've got tons of folks knocking on doors and making calls and such. And I heard from someone who had a paid canvasser, one of Kurt's paid canvassers, knock on their door. And they were doing their pitch, what they were being paid to do. And then they admitted that they were embarrassed to be having to canvass for him because they know the truth on the ground. And so even the folks he's paying are embarrassed because especially our young folks and working families know the direction that we need to go. So I'm really proud to have the support. Really want to turn over and answer any questions folks may have. But the bottom line is, how do we get this work done? We're seeing progressives, and that even the term progressives, maligned and pushed aside. Kurt's been saying that I'm running to the left of him. I'm proudly doing that, but I've also said that he's gone so far to the right that running to the left of him simply means I'm a Democrat. We need folks who are going to work on getting the job done, taking care of our families, taking care of our planet, and taking care of our democracy.
Thank you, Jamie. Okay, so let's get into questions. All right, so we have our friend Kay Teckle. Forgive me if I'm not saying your last name correctly, Kay. But Kay, you submitted a great question. Would you like to unmute yourself, please, and ask Jamie your question? And will you please share with folks, where are you joining us from, Kay?
I'm from Southern California, about an hour from LA.
Great.
That's
Thank
where I'm calling
you.
from.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us. What's your question for Jamie, Kay?
Okay, my question is this. With the recent information about turning over Roe versus Wade, this is my question almost verbatim. It takes two people to make a baby. If they are going to take away women's rights to determine their own bodies, then how can we institute a law that make the father of these children financially responsible till their age of 30? That would pay for their undergraduate and graduate work to set them up in financially a responsible position to further on with their lives. That's basically what the question is.
Yeah,
How can we achieve that?
Yeah, I appreciate this requiring responsibility and the pushback on that. For me, though, the first and foremost is to really codify and put into law the actual protections that the court's about to strip. And so what I really want to see us do, I mean, with the recent leaked draft ruling and decision from the Supreme Court, then everyone I know has heard about this. We know that our rights, for really the first time, I think in the history of our country, we're seeing the Supreme Court actually remove rights rather than recognize rights using the Constitution as the basis. And so it's going to be really important that we protect the rights that we have. We protect the right to, a woman's right to choose, but really now that we have an expanded sense with our trans community, it's really a person's right to choose what to do with their body, and our bodily autonomy is critically important to our identity. So we have to protect that right. We also know that there's members of the Supreme Court who've made it really clear that this is just the start. And the language that has been used in this memo really opens the door to go after other rights. We've had my right to be married to my wife is now potentially under attack. Loving versus Virginia, the right of interracial couples to marry. And that was, my mom and my stepdad. Now we've had people talking about that. If this goes forward as written, it sets the stage to remove all sorts of right. And we have been dependent on our Supreme Court to protect our rights. Without that, we're going to have to turn to the legislative body, to Congress, and make sure that we are creating laws to establish that on a federal level, because otherwise it falls down to the state level. And then first, we're going to see a lack of choice in some of the states. There's Texas and other states have already moved forward on that. But we're also seeing other rights that are going to be gone after next if all this just goes back to the states. But something that's really important, and actually is another key distinguisher in my race, is this awareness that even today, even before this decision goes forward, there are people in our country who do not have the rights and access to reproductive services and the right to the access to an abortion. And that is because of the Hyde Amendment. The Hyde Amendment prohibits federal funds being spent on abortion and reproductive services. So anyone who is dependent on Medicare or Medicaid or the Indian Health Services, this is the big deal here in Oregon. We have 9 federally recognized tribes. I live about an hour from Warm Springs. I have friends who are there who they rely on the Indian Health Services. And right now, even before this dreadful decision that's about to come down, we have people now who do not have access to services. So we need to not go backwards. We need to be going forwards and bringing everyone along. It's just part of the many systemic injustices we have in our country. And those are some of the many things we must address. If we're truly going to protect our democracy, it's got to be a democracy for everyone, because it has not been that in the past. And we need to be moving forward, not backwards.
Thank you, Jamie. Kay, thank you so much for joining us. Kay, thank you for the question. Okay, up next, let's keep it rolling. We're going to go to our friend Nola, Miss Nola Chaffee. Nola, can you please go ahead and unmute yourself? And can you share with us where are you joining us from?
Hi, Jamie. Congratulations on your candidacy. I'm joining you from Kurt Schrader Land, Milwaukee, Oregon. And my question to you, Jamie, is what can our Democratic leadership do to make sure that the January 6th sedition organizers are held to legal account?
Yeah, we need, and there's a committee in place now, but we really need to put some muscle behind that. We need to set a standard that if you're going to go after and try to attack our democracy, that you will be held accountable. This is something that should be, there's so many things right now that should be no-brainers across the political spectrum, but this is a huge one. And we must protect this form of government that we have. It's an imperfect form of government, but it demands that we get involved, and we also must protect it through laws and through holding people accountable, those who have essentially tried to undermine our democracy with a coup, which that essentially was. Early in my career, I began my public service working in post-war Bosnia and Kosovo. Early in my career, I got my engineering and planning degree, and then I wanted to serve. I'd come out as a young adult, so didn't have the opportunity I couldn't serve in uniform that was back in the day when it wasn't allowed if you were out. But so I began my public service right after the war in Bosnia ended, and I was hired by a humanitarian organization, the International Rescue Committee, and I managed the reconstruction of schools and hospitals in Bosnia and Kosovo. And to see the destruction of war, it's similar to what's going on in Ukraine now. I mean, we have to help, move beyond that war, and then there will be recovery efforts. But when you're in a war zone, in a post-war zone, you look around and you see that devastation. I had this moment where this almost epiphany where, while I'd always been critical of our government, I came to believe that we have the best imperfect form of government that there is. It's imperfect because of all the flaws that we can all think of, so many examples, but it allows us to run for office and to vote. So protecting those rights and supporting folks who represent our values is so critically important. and holding people accountable who try to attack our government. Because this form of government, this democracy that we have, this democratic republic, is something that is of great value, but it's only going to be of value if we protect it, if we turn out, if we vote, if we make sure our elections are fair, and if we hold accountable those who try to attack our form of government.
Thank you, Nola. Thank you so much. Jamie, thank you for the question. Okay, up next, let's keep it going. Up next, we have our friend Aimee Boden. Aimee, will you please go ahead and unmute yourself, and will you share with folks where you're calling in from?
So thank you, Rachel. I'm calling in from Brooklyn, New York. And Jamie, I've just recently learned about you, and I am totally floored by how wonderful you are. And my question actually is a little bit weird, but it has to do with water and the drought issues, because I saw in your bio on your website that you have some experience in the watershed project. So, and I've heard nothing but like all of these dire issues with California. I assume that's also Oregon, with like water and drought issues. So could you just sort of address what you know about that and how you plan to deal with that?
Yeah, sure. And
It's
first of all,
not an issue in New York City, but I know it's an issue with fires and all of the other things that you were just mentioning earlier.
yeah, so I first of all have to, water questions are my favorite, but I have to warn everyone that I have to stop myself from really geeking out when because actually, I worked as environmental planner for Regional Water Agency. I studied water law and Indian law is my law degree, and natural resources are focused on that. And I also serve on the statewide Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board, where we work on helping to protect healthy and sustainable watersheds. And then also recently received money from the Oregon legislature to help in drought relief. So the drought we're facing, and the West Coast is in a 20+ year drought right now. It's been part and parcel of why we've had these devastating wildfires in California and Oregon. So it's climate change. I mean, it's the climate impacts. Now in rural areas, I mean, everyone's talking about it, you know, progressive, conservative, urban, rural. The language we use is different in different areas. I mean, you know, with more progressive Democrats in urban areas, we talk about actual climate change and or climate crisis and use that language. In rural areas, when I'm talking to farmers, conservative Republican farmers who are working closely together because it's destroying their family farms, we talk about it as drought. We talk about the cause. You know, you almost have to translate across the political divide sometime. But again, we're all talking about these issues. So there's three big things that we need to be looking at regarding the climate crisis, and this ties into water. One is changing the trajectory that we're on. Right now, we are actually, our taxpayer dollars today are investing and paying for the very, the fossil fuel energy grid that is destroying our planet. We need to be changing those investments into renewable and sustainable energy. We actually have to make some really heavy and aggressive investments in changing around this trajectory, in building up a sustainable energy grid, and also new technology, new research. And this is one of the areas that Kurt Schrader has actually stripped some of these programs out of the infrastructure bill and out of Build Back Better. Again, he got $300,000 for big oil and big gas, so it's a pay to play type response. But it was egregious that he would do that when our homes are literally burning down. I understand that he spends most of his time living in his home in Maryland, of one of his 4 homes. And I heard that in the East Coast, people saw the smoke from our wildfires. Last year, I spent half the year working in a community that 1/3 of the homes and 1/3 of the businesses were lost due to wildfire. And it was mostly farm workers and seniors on a fixed income who had lost their homes. They were devastated. They lost everything and had just minutes to flee. This is the threat that we're under right now. So we need to be making investments to change the trajectory around our climate, protecting our climate. Mm-hmm. The second thing we need to do, and this is some of the work I'm doing right now with the state, is helping people prepare. We know that before we really turn this ship around, we've got more disaster coming. Here in Central Oregon, where I live, we've had really bad drought the last couple of years, and it's only going to get worse in the next few. And, our whole home almost burned down. There was a wildfire in the area. Had the wind been blowing in a different direction, we could have
Wow.
lost our home last year. So making sure that communities are prepared. And again, this is really especially important that we're working with community-based organizations and communities that don't necessarily even trust the government, work closely with the government, make sure all communities have part of that preparation process and feel safe and have a plan in place when there is a disaster and can know where to turn. And it's not just wildfire, it's also ice storms, it's drought, it's wildfire, it's all of these different things, heat domes, especially the folks who pick the food we put on our tables. The farm workers are sometimes hit the hardest by this, and they're having to work out in this heat. And so all of those things have to be factored in terms of the preparation. I've actually worked on some of those things too during COVID and was helping farm workers. And then the third piece is also response. When disaster has struck, making sure that government is, in FEMA at the national level, is as responsive as quickly and being as helpful as possible. In the conversations I've had with folks throughout CD5, there's sections that were burned down a couple of years ago. And even in more conservative areas, the conversations I've had with folks is about how, asking them what the response was from FEMA. And there's a lot of opportunity for improvement. I'm not criticizing the individuals who worked on it, but there's policies in place that restrict quick action and better responsiveness. And those are things we need to fix. And then just lastly, around water, this is a difference in East Coast and West Coast. There's different types of water law in terms of how it's laid out. Water law on the West Coast was laid out kind of a first in time, first and right. And that was established decades ago to try to get, mostly, Europeans to move out west to take over the land. And so there's issues, but most water law is actually state law unless it crosses boundaries.
Thank you, Jamie. Aimee, thank you so much, Aimee. Thank you for the
And
question.
thank you, Rachel. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, up next, we are going to go to Anthony Lewis. Anthony, can you please go ahead and unmute yourself? Will you share with folks where are you joining us from?
Hello, everybody. My name is Sergeant Anthony Edward Lewis, United States Army Infantry, retired. I'm reaching out to everybody in the group here from Michigan City, Indiana. Originally, I'm from
Welcome.
I know that's pretty far away from Oregon.
What's your question for Jamie?
I have one question, but before I get into it, there is one thing I absolutely have to morally say, and that is, Jamie, I was so proud of you. I was impressed and amazed when I saw your face. You dug that a mud hole. You pounded the crap out of this abomination, your competitor. And if nobody ever tells you, I appreciate it. And it actually, I believe, is going to set the standard. People are going to be less tolerant of nonsense because of your example. Thank you. The question I have is, I actually posted in the chat like a dozen questions, but the one question I was asked to ask you directly is, when are we going to get rid of the filibuster? I'm a big Bernie bro from way back. And my genuine concern as a veteran, as an American citizen, regardless of party, is what is going to happen in the system to get rid of the corruption in the system, like dark money. Yeah. When are we going to get rid of the filibuster? What are we going to do to immediately put a death date on that?
Yeah, we have to elect the right people to make it happen. And I can tell you, I was at first really cautious at the thought of removing the filibuster, because there are some processes and kind of some safety rails in our processes, but it really, to your point, it's prevented critical legislation from moving forward. And at this point, we need to get some stuff done. And actually, before I say any of that, let me just start out by saying thank you for your service, and thank you for putting yourself on the line on our behalf. One of the things that I was horrified by Kurt Schrader, one of the many things, is his vote against some of the basic things during COVID and relief and protections for folks. And one of the things he voted against, I think he was the only one of the few Democrats to vote against the HEROES Act. And for those of you who don't know, that was an act that essentially said, during the pandemic, debt collectors cannot harass veterans and active service duty members. He voted against that. That was horrific, because there is serving your country is an act of honor, and we need to respect that. We need to honor that. So to the filibuster, we need the right people in Congress to turn it over. We've got some people who have just been outspoken against it. We've got some other people who will say one thing and do another. And that's often what we see in Kurt Schrader. I mean, that's why that whole, it's like the Joe Manchin of the House, but he's not honest about his votes here in Oregon. He will turn around and claim to do the exact opposite of how he's actually voted. And that's incredibly frustrating to be up against. But the other thing is, follow the money. And what you're saying about dark money or undisclosed money, and also all the corporate PAC money that's coming in, we're getting doused with it in this race. And it's really, that's what I was saying. It's like Oregonians and people. I don't take corporate PAC money. So it's people versus corporate PAC money. And we heard just last week that an additional 800,000 was being dumped on me to start running hit pieces on me. I mean, it means they're scared. I was saying this earlier. It's like we tweeted out Pat Benatar's song, "Hit Me With Your Best Shot," because it's like, bring it. We are so ready for this, and you can't intimidate us. We're doing the right thing. We know we're doing the right thing. We're taking care of the people who are being bullied. I have zero tolerance for bullies, and I'm going to stand up to them. And we just need folks in office who will stand up, who will keep their eye on the prize, and really be true and committed to caring for voters and caring for issues of justice and, protecting people on our planet. And that's the job. That's a job I want to do. And those who are not doing it need to, thank them for their service and have them retire.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you for your passion and for the question. And Jamie, thank you for the thoughtful response. So we're going to keep rolling because we have a ton more questions rolling in. We're going to use every minute we can with Jamie. I'll just say one quick thing. There's a lot of action going on in the chat. Folks are really fired up and engaged. Mike Fox, extremely generous. He is writing in the chat box. He's personally going to match the next $100 in donations. So Mike, thank you. So folks, if you can chip in, please consider doing that, and we'll hold Mike to his match. So thank you so much, Mike. Okay, folks, next question. Let's go to our friend Rick Hodgkins. Rick, sir, can you please go ahead and unmute yourself? And can you please share with all of the folks here where you join us from, and what's your question for Jamie?
Okay, my name is Rick Hodgkins, and that is spelled H-O-D as in dino, G as in giraffe, K-I-N-S, and I live in Citrus Heights, California, which is in eastern Sacramento County. As some of you may know, that Sacramento is the capital of California. My question for Jamie is, do you support disability rights? And Oregon is among one of the first states to get rid of sheltered workshops. Amen to that. And Maryland was among the other states as well. And California, we're among the third of 13 states, including Maryland and Oregon and Vermont. So anyway, that's what I wanted. That was my question.
So absolutely, yes. And let me tell you a story, but in just a minute. But first of all, really proud of Oregon in many ways. Oregon's a very progressive state. And that's why in this race, it's really, Oregonians are looking at is who's the best match of values and who can bring people together for not just the primary, but for the general as well. Because this newly drawn seat that is cut the old seat in half. So Kurt is a city member of Congress, but it cut his old seat in half and redrew it, now extends into Central Oregon. And we have an opportunity here to really focus on Oregon values, which are core. They include things on, respecting people and respecting all rights. So my first name is Jamie, as you know, and I was actually named after my godfather, whose name was James Grasscamp, and he was a quadriplegic. And I know there's many forms of ability. And he was someone that my father got to know, and actually my father worked for him. James Grasscamp was a professor at the University of Wisconsin and was a professor pre-ADA law. And so here he was in a wheelchair, quadriplegic, teaching us as in a place that had feet of snow every winter and had all sorts of challenges for him. And I mean, he was one of the great inspirations to my family and a great inspiration to all of his students. But that sense of really seeing leadership and the potential for leadership in everyone is really key. And I think we're missing that when our own thinking is limited and we don't make space and celebrate and support the leadership of all Americans. And, the bias against folks who are struggling with one or another form of disability is one of the shortfalls that we need to really change our thinking on. So we talk about racial justice and equity. It's also just as true with issues of ability and disability. And even that term disability locks us into a negative perspective and a negative thinking. I remember reading a very influential book when I was young that essentially referred to those who, in terms of physical, did not identify as having physical disability as TAPs, as temporarily able persons, because we will all during our lifetime be in a place where with the reality of different challenges will come about us. And so really changing our thinking and creating an environment that is inclusive and also accessible to everyone is just really important work that needs to be done.
Rick, thank
Thanks,
you so
Rick.
much for joining us. Thank you for the question. Okay, up next, let's folks. We have some folks joining us from Facebook and online. I don't want to leave them out, so I'm gonna try and pull some of those folks in here. So Jamie, from joining us from online, Carol, joining us from Atlanta, Georgia. She asked, "What is the #1 issue you hear from folks in your community? Is there a common thread that runs throughout your conversations with voters?"
There's really 3 big ones, and it depends on where you are in the district and what someone's personal experience is. And so, I'm really proud to be supported by so many working families and working people. I've got a lot of labor support, but essentially those who helped us through the COVID economy and those who helped us through these tough times. So teachers and nurses and grocery clerks and longshoremen and warehouse folks, those folks who got us to this point and helped us through. Working families are struggling so desperately with, affordable housing and affordable health care and the price of prescription drugs and childcare, being able to even access work, the cost of young folks, the cost of, a fear of going into debt. I'm a stepmom myself, and our kids are afraid of going into debt because just because of the situation we're seeing right now. So making sure there's like access to debt-free community college. And then also I've got a couple different plans I've been talking about on that are like a GI Bill for civilians, especially in professions that we need to be investing in to help people go through, get the education training, get the job placement they need, because that really helps us in our economy overall. So those are a lot of things I'm hearing from working families. The other big one, and it touches on the question asked before about water and drought, is wildfires. We're going to face another wildfire season, and it's terrifying for folks, especially in Central Oregon. That's usually the big issue in Central Oregon, is wildfires or drought. With our ag community is really struggles and is barely getting by right now. And there's, when I drove over to the metro area today from Central Oregon, and I saw a big sign that said farm for sale. And it was heartbreaking, but people are being driven out. So, the drought piece is another big one. And then also a lot of folks just talking about their fear for our democracy. Everything from the insurrection, which was mentioned before, the big money in politics that's not allowing us to elect folks who are our representatives, but we're having corporate PACs put their thumb on the scale and try to buy elections. There's that piece of it. There's also, mentioned before, the PRO Act, the Protect the Right to Organize. So making sure workers can organize in their place of work. Protecting our democracy is a huge piece, and also bridging the divide, the urban-rural divide and the political divide. One of the reasons I had so much success back in 2018, and again, the largest voter swing of any race in the country, and I was running as a progressive out lesbian in the most conservative part of Oregon, and meeting with folks and having those conversations face to face and hearing the same issues that progressives are talking about are the same thing conservatives are talking about in rural areas. They sometimes use different language, but it's the same issues. And so making sure we can bridge those divides so we can actually get corporations out of the way and start getting solutions done. Folks like the guy I'm running against, Kurt Trader, they've been an apologist for. Yes, they've been funded and followed the the wish of the pay to play for the corporate PAC donors, but they're also not creating solutions. Kurt's vote against lowering prescription drug prices, that's not a Republican or a Democrat issue. That's over 90% of the folks in our district want prescription drug prices to go down. I talked to a grandfather who was lamenting that his grandson needs an EpiPen and they can't afford it. Talked to a woman with Parkinson's disease, and she's now no longer able to afford the prescription drugs she needs to be able to function in public. I mean, these are all the issues that people are talking about. And I remember my own experience as a young kid with a mom raised, a single mom raising 2 kids. And when, there was an unexpected expense or rent went up, our food budget went down. That's the reality that most Americans are facing. And, in the past, there's this assumption that Democrats get it more than Republicans, but so many Democrats are now listening and following their corporate donors and not taking care of the issues that working families are struggling with. So it really depends on where in the district I am, and also, frankly, someone's socioeconomic status. But those are the 3 big issues that I'm hearing.
Thank you. Thank you, Jamie. All right, folks. So I'm going to kick it back up. Thank you so much for all those thoughtful questions, and Jamie for all those thoughtful responses. So I'm going to kick it over back to Stephanie Taylor, our co-founder. And I think she has one last final question for you, Jamie. So Stephanie, please.
I do. And thank you to everyone for the great questions, and to Jamie for your thoughtful answers. I hope you were inspired by Jamie's candidacy and that you'll consider chipping in whatever you can afford to this grassroots campaign. We had some great conversation in the chat, some great challenges, definitely some folks kind of encouraging each other. And that's the kind of grassroots support, grassroots person to grassroots person, grassroots supporter to grassroots supporter that we love to see. So Jamie, my last question for you, can you leave us with a few thoughts about the urgency of right now? We're coming up on your primary date. Tell us a little bit about how contributions are fueling your campaign right now. How can folks get plugged in as volunteers, particularly from afar? How can we all support your campaign best right now when we're really in the final crunch?
Well, thanks for that question. And Oregon is a vote by mail state, and ballots have already gone out. So some people have already voted. So this really is that time of urgency right now today. And the last date of mail-in ballots is May 17th. But between now and then, people are still, those who are not as familiar with the race are still making up their minds. So any contributions you make go into direct voter outreach. You can also help out if you're in Oregon and in the district. You can also help by volunteering and knocking on doors, or you can call in. I mean, there's on jamiefororegon.com. If someone could type that into if it's not already in the chat. You can go online, you can volunteer, you can get on our newsletter, but if you can contribute, those funds go directly into voter outreach. We've got mailers, we're up on TV. Any additional funds we've got helps us to spend more time on TV. And it's just part of the, figuring out how we reach those folks who haven't yet heard about our race and heard about the alternative to Kurt Schrader. Those who know Kurt Schrader are so frustrated with them. Even folks who support him, I talked to, they were really frustrated with them, and they've known him. But so many people who have known him are really nervous about him being the nominee for 2 reasons. One, because he will likely lose this seat. This newly drawn seat is going to be very close. It's what's called a D+1. And what that means to political wonks is you take an average Republican or average Democrat, and it's almost split. This is going to be a nationally targeted race. So his high negatives will pull this out. There's not enthusiasm for him. He has to pay people to knock on doors for him. With that lack of enthusiasm, it doesn't only mean it makes him very, very vulnerable in the general. It also hurts down ballot candidates because every race is important. In a race this close, had he run in a race this close back in 2020, he would have lost. Had I run a race this close in 2018, I would have cleaned Walden's clocks. I would have won hands down. And so it's the ability to voter turnout, get people excited, have crossover voters. I had people back in 2018 who asked for signs that said Republicans for Mcleod-Skinner. They said they'd never voted for a Democrat before, but talking common sense about addressing the challenges that we're facing. That's why I keep saying the issues that we're talking about, they are winning issues. They're the issues that the majority of Americans want. That's why the filibuster question was important. That's why, getting people together and talking about things and building these coalitions to move things forward. We've done it in Central Oregon. We can do this across the country, but we just need the people in place who actually want to get things done. So if you can help out, the urgency, the time is now. If you can contribute, JamieForOregon.com. If you can volunteer, JamieForOregon.com. And if you know other people and can leverage your resource, if you know people who can contribute, if you know people who can volunteer, we are in a heck of a battle right now. And he's got all sorts of money pouring in because he's vulnerable. People know he's weak. He had the leader of the free world, got the first endorsement in this race against little old me, because he's so weak. Kurt Schrader is so weak. And the scary thing is not even just that he will likely lose this seat in the general. That almost the scarier thing is if he gets in and wins, he will then truly be the Joe Manchin of the House. I mean, he's voting that way now. He's been the lone Democrat or one of two or three or few Democrats who have really undermined the Democratic agenda, undermined Build Back Better. He's one of the key reasons why Democrats are in so much trouble in the midterm, because we were not able to move forward with a positive progressive agenda that Americans wanted. And so if he is in that key role, he's going to do exactly what Manchin's doing. He's already voted no on so many of these things or gotten in the way of him. The Hyde Amendment, which I mentioned, he's been a proponent of the Hyde Amendment. He's spoken out and talked about how great it is. And so we've got someone here with all our civil rights and our economy and our environment and our democracy on the line. We've got someone who's gotten in the way of it, or either directly or indirectly undermined and carved out and knocked it down. And we need to stand up. I mean, this is an opportunity. I'd be proud to represent Oregonians, and I'd be proud to serve all Americans in Congress, but this is a team effort, and I need my team to step up and help me do it.
Cheers to that. Thank you, Jamie. Folks, thank you so much. Chip in what you can. If you've already chipped in some, you can chip in more, please do. If you have friends, let your friends know about Jamie. We're inspired. I hope you folks feel inspired too. So with that, please keep your eyes open for our next invite to our next Meet the Candidates. But for right now, can everyone please unmute yourself and let's all give each other a nice warm goodbye and go get them, Jamie.
You are awesome, Jamie.
You go,
Awesome,
Jamie. Thank you, Jamie. You're great. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thanks, everybody.
I wish I lived in Oregon.
Thank you.
You can still contribute. You can still
Bye,
volunteer.
Jamie.
Take
It
care.
was nice to
everybody.
meet you.
Thank you, folks. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, everyone. Good night, folks. We'll see you next time.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye.
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 From John Green.
Good luck, everybody.
No.
Thank